So let's turn to Genesis chapter 32. I have entitled this chapter, Success and Struggles. Success and Struggles. So we're going to see the key to success in struggles, more closer to the end. And as you've known, if you look at Jacob's life, he's went through a lot of things. And a lot of it he's brought on himself. And the thing about Jacob's life, we can all relate to him. Some things happen to you. Some things because of the bad decisions we make. You guys ever make bad decisions? And you got to pay for it? Well, Jacob has been paying for his for 20 years. So originally Jacob, remember he fled from his home to his uncle Laban. Now Uncle Laban, he had never met him before. And he's probably thankful he hadn't met him before this time. But after that, he goes there and, you know, all the things he went through, had to work 14 years, worked all the way up to 20 years. He was there 20 years, and he thought it was going to be a short amount of time. And the reason why he stayed so long is because his uncle deceived him. And then when he left, because of the way Jacob left, God told him, it's time for you to return home. That's the positive thing, and he was obedient. But the way he did it kind of like, you know, we hear God direct us and we obey, but sometimes the way we fulfill what he tells us is wrong. Because of his fear of Laban, and, you know, I look at that guy, I can understand fearing your uncle that's devious, like, you don't know what this guy's going to do, but God said, I want you to go. So again, where God guides you, he will provide for you and protect you. So instead of going to Laban, he just up and left. Now when Laban finds out, you remember 3 days later, he finds out Jacob's left with my 2 daughters, all my grandchildren, and he chases after him. And reality, he got a lot of his family together. He was out to attack him, and more than likely, Jacob wasn't going to survive. So I believe he was out to kill him. So Jacob resolves that conflict, you remember, with his uncle. They came to agreement. In other words, here's a line. We're good long as you stay on your side and I stay on mine. But if you cross it, you're done. So he resolved that one. So he turns and continues to head back to the promised land. But see, the thing is, when he's looking at Laban, the conflict here, he turns this way. He's actually taking his family towards another conflict. A conflict with his brother Esau that he hadn't resolved 20 years ago. The whole reason he left is because he deceived, because of his deception. Jacob left his homeland because of deception, his own deception. Now, his mother did have a big part in it, but can't blame her because he chose to obey her in deception. So he deceived his father, pretended to be his brother Esau, and through this deception of his father, he ended up robbing his brother of his birthright. Now, we know if that's what God was going to give to Jacob, he could have just given it to him. You know, many times we know what God's going to do, but we try to help him out. All through the Old Testament, we've seen every time man tries to do things for God, we do it the wrong way, and it has these bad repercussions. So now he's headed back, and he's worried. He left his home because Esau was angry. Esau was so angry that he says, I'm going to kill my brother. And that's when his mother comes in and says, you know, his mother loved Jacob more than Esau. And so she would protect him. So she sent him away. But 20 years have passed. And think about this. Jacob is hoping that the winds of time have cooled his brother's anger. He's hoping 20 years was enough time. At least his brother would cool off enough and he would just beat him up. You know, because he wanted to take his life. And what we're going to see also today, as he returns home, we're going to see Jacob being humbled. I think he's already been humbled for the past 20 years, experiencing what it feels like to be deceived, to be lied to. Everything that he did to his brother and his father, he got paid back tenfold with his uncle. And we're also going to see, as he begins to travel, as again, God told him to go back, he once again is met by God in the desert. I kind of like saying the word desert, because we're in the desert. God likes to meet us where we are, here in the desert. But this time we're going to see Jacob wrestles with God. But after this encounter, Jacob is never the same, physically and spiritually. So with that, let's go ahead and look at Genesis chapter 32. We're going to look at the first two verses. Genesis chapter 32, verse 1. Jacob also went on his way, and the angels of God met him. When Jacob saw them, he said, "This is the camp of God." So he named the place Mahanaim. So we see he leaves in the desert. God met Jacob on the way. When he was traveling to Laban's, when he was running, God actually met him there in the desert on the way over. Now it's kind of interesting, on the way back, he meets angels, a group of angels. And again, I see this a picture of him encouraging him. And he talks about how Esau was so angry, how he had tricked him. But he meets these angels, and basically give him an encouragement. Continue to go back home as God has told you. I mean, you see a bunch of angels, and they're going to encourage you. I mean, you're going to feel uplifted, aren't you? Like, God has sent us here to give you encouragement. Both times when Esau was running, when he was traveling, it seems like he was running all the time. And that's going to be an interesting fact. Remember that Jacob seems to always be running from his troubles. So he's always running because he's full of fear. He ran towards Laban because of fear. He ran from Laban because he feared Laban. But it's nothing like meeting the angels of God to calm your fears. Because right now it's the angels of God. And as we get, I want to try to get ahead of myself, because we'll see he actually meets with God in the desert again. And he gives the area the name Mahanaim, meaning two camps. In other words, he wasn't alone. There was his camp, and there was the camp of the angels. So that is encouraging as he was traveling. You know how God has his angels. And I know God has used those, as I told you Sunday, how he saved my life several times, because there had to be angels there to protect me. I don't know if you guys have had those experiences. Sometimes you can explain why, but if you look back, you said, there's no reason that I should be alive, except that God saved me. And you look at Jacob's life, but there's no reason that guy should be alive. All the deception and deceiving that he did. Let's go ahead and look at the next few verses. Let's look at verses 3 through 6. Jacob sent messengers ahead of him to his brother Esau in the land of Seer, the country of Edom. He instructed them, "This is what you are to say to my lord Esau. Your servant Jacob says, I have been staying with Laban and have remained there till now. I have cattle and donkeys and sheep and goats, male and female servants. Now I am sending this message to my lord, that I may find favor in your eyes." When the messenger returned to Jacob, they said, "We went to your brother Esau. Now he is coming to meet you, and 400 men are with him." He could just left that last part off. It would have been great. So what I see is Jacob is going back home, and he knows he got to be having a lot of anxiety. I'm going to meet up with my brother. Is he still, playing all the scenarios? Is he still angry? He sends a messenger before him to go out and meet with his brother Esau. And this is the beginning, the phase of him being humbled. "Go out and tell my brother Esau, your servant," and the way Jacob puts the words, "tell Esau, your servant." So we see him humbling himself. Again, he has the birthright. But he's saying, "Your servant Jacob told me to tell you this, that he's returning home, and he would like the safe passage through here." And he tells Esau, "I am very rich." Now, all the things about all these animals he has, he's saying, "I'm very rich." Does it sound like he's bragging, right? I got all this stuff, but you got to understand what he's doing. When he left, he has the birthright. So when he left, who you think had that possession of all the cattle and stuff of his father, of Isaac? Esau. So what are you saying? "I'm coming, I'm rich, I don't need to take any of the stuff that you have." So in other words, he's trying to put him at ease. I'm not coming back to assert my birthright, because God has blessed him beyond belief. He left, as we'll see, with a cane, with a stick. I'm not a cane, with a staff. And he comes back with this huge family with all these animals. And in those days, the cattle, and that's how they determined if they were wealthy. And he was very, very wealthy. Now, it's interesting. How does Esau respond? Now, if we would just take the first part, he says, "Esau is coming to meet you." It's like, wow, maybe he can't wait to meet me because he's missed me. But then you add the last part. This is where his heart drops. With 400 men. Thinking, that doesn't sound good, does it? He's coming to meet you. He should have just reworded it. He's coming to meet you with 400 men. How do you think Jacob, what do you think Jacob thought about this? What did Jacob think about Esau's response? He's all excited, like we're going to throw down. No, he's like, I'm going to die. Let's see what happens next. He's thinking, he's going to come. Here's what he's thinking. He's going to come and he's going to wipe me out. He's going to take revenge upon me. You guys can see that pretty clearly, guessing what he's thinking, but it's pretty obvious in his words. Verse 7, here's what I'm talking about. In great fear, didn't just say fear, it says, in great fear and distress, Jacob divided the people who were with him into two groups, and the flocks and herds and camels as well. He thought, if Esau comes and attacks one group, the group that is left may escape. So basically, he's filled with fear. He panics. So in his haste, when he panics, what he does, we don't hear him talking to God. He divides the two groups. He's thinking, if he attacks one group, maybe if we're lucky, the other group will survive. This is 400 men. And if the anger is still hot as it was before, he's going to wipe them all out. I'll give you a quote from David Guzik when he talks about this. He says, when Laban confronted Jacob, now listen to this. When Laban confronted Jacob with the hostile militia, you remember Laban came after Jacob? He came at him with hostility. Jacob boldly stood up to him and spoke his mind. But now with Esau, Jacob was afraid to meet him. Why is that? What's the difference here? Well, he knew when Laban was coming after him and he was accusing him of stealing his idols, he knew that he was in the right because he didn't steal it. But look at him with Esau. Here's where you're at a loss. He knows that he wronged his brother. He knows he's wrong. It's harder when you're in the wrong to stand up like, okay, you want to attack me? I'm going to stand up to you. But what about when you know that you're the one that caused this anger? You're almost like, rightly so, I deserve this. So what does Jacob do next? Now he acts, he splits up his group in two, hoping that some will survive. Here's what he should have did in the first place. Verse 9, then Jacob prayed. What if we stop there? How many of you guys were confronted with something in your life and you do all these things that your mind can think of and they don't work, which they usually don't, and then you think, maybe I should pray. No, it's more like this. I don't know what else to do but pray. You notice that spare tire mentality? And I always bring this up. Have you guys yet to go check and see if you have a spare tire in your car? You never know if you have one until you need it. You hope it's there, right? This is the way we treat God sometimes. We don't go to Him until He's the last resort. God that created everything and created us, knows our every thought, knows our past, present, future. He knows everything about us, and He's the last one to ask. I would ask you, God, but I'm not really sure if your wisdom is up to par. I have greater wisdom. That's what we're saying. I'm going to do what my mind thinks. So he prayed, which he should have did at the beginning. O God of my father Abraham, God of my father Isaac, Lord, you who said to me, now this is his prayer. He's praying to him. You told me, go back to your country and your relatives, and I will make you prosper. I am unworthy of all kindness and faithfulness you have shown your servant. I had only my staff when I crossed the Jordan, but now I have become two camps. Save me, I pray, from the hand of my brother Esau, for I am afraid. I'm afraid he will come and attack me, and also the mothers with their children. See, this is exactly what I was saying. I had read it already. He was afraid, and afraid he was going to come and wipe out his whole family. But you have said, I will surely make you prosper, and will make your descendants like the sand of the sea, which cannot be counted. So Jacob, in his prayer, he repeats. You know what he does at the beginning? It sounds like he's complaining, but you said you were going to do this. What he's kind of saying is, he repeats the words that God spoke to him. This is what you said. You told me to go. You told me to return to my homeland, and I'm obeying. You can get that. You can see that, because I can see it in my own life. He tells us to obey, and the first thing we do happens when we obey, we run into confrontation. Hold on, God, didn't you? If God is telling you to do it, it should be smooth sailing, right? It's never that way. He runs to the confrontation, so he's telling God, hey, this is what you told me to do. I'm being obedient. Matter of fact, Joseph is a great example. He was obedient over and over, and he kept getting thrown in prison because he was obedient. Even we do that sometimes. Don't you think, maybe I should just be like the wicked people? They seem to prosper. But in the end, they're going to face God's judgment. He goes on and says, You told me you would prosper me. You told me to go back. Not only that, but you said you would prosper me. And then I like this part. He goes into repeating, but now here he says, even though this is my situation, up to this point in my life, you've blessed me greatly. You've blessed me more than I deserve. Now this is Jacob revealing his heart. Here's the fact, and we all should be able to say this. God, you've blessed me much more than I deserve. None of us, including myself, none of us deserve for Jesus to come and die for us. None of us. But because of his love for us, that's why he came and died for us. He says, you have shown me love and kindness. God showed him love and kindness even when he was unable to show it to his own father and his own brother. Now, Jacob's not like the perfect example of this pure guy. No, he's done some bad things. But God has put him through his life. Many times we go through difficulties, things happen, but God also puts us in places so that it changes and molds our character. You don't think it changed him, make him stop and think, maybe I shouldn't deceive this person because I know how it feels to be on the other side. You've shown me love, you've shown me kindness. I came to this foreign land, I had nothing. But now I've left with this large family and I have great wealth. But, and what I like about his prayer, he's honest. And we need to be honest with God. He knows our heart anyway. He wants to hear us say it. He says, but I am afraid. I believe that my brother Esau is going to attack me and my family. Now it's not just worried about himself. He's worried about his family. He believes if my brother sees us, he's going to see what I've gained, and he's going to take and wipe all that out, kill all my family, and take all my cattle, but mainly destroy my family. But if he destroys me, he goes back to this, but if he destroys me, then how will you fulfill your promises? It's kind of like, here's your promise. What I'm saying is he's fearing, and you can question God. You say, I don't understand what's going on. I'm fearful. The promise you gave me that I would have innumerable descendants. So think about this. He's saying, my brother's going to wipe everybody out. I'm going to have no descendants. So how are you going to fulfill that promise? Now, God he could wipe them all out and raise him back to life, of course. But in the normal situation, thinking, God, how's this going to happen? I don't understand. I'm sure you guys have been there where you're in a situation and you just don't understand how it's going to turn out the way God said it's going to be. Even as we live in this world today, God says, I'm going to judge the wicked. But when we look today, do you see the wicked being judged? They seem to prosper. He's like, whatever I said, I will do. We got to take and trust in his word. So what Jacob is saying here, in other words, it doesn't look like what you said is going to happen. You promised this. I see this. But how far can you see? Without my glasses, I can't see the back of the room. But I'm talking about you can't see far ahead of you. You make decisions hoping they're the right one. God knows how everything is going to turn out. So if he says it's going to happen and you don't see how's that a problem? It's like, God, I don't get it. He says, well, it's not for you to get. It's for you just to be obedient. Can you guys get that as an application? Just be obedient. There's going to be many things that God does that we don't understand. If Esau wipes me out and my family, how are you going to fulfill your promise? Simply put, here's what let's sum up everything he said. Save me, God, I'm afraid. That's what he's really saying. I'm afraid. And I think that's something we need to be able to tell God. I'm afraid. I know what you said you'd do. Trusting God is one thing, but it doesn't mean you're not going to have fear. I believe you said you're going to do, but I don't see it, but I'm afraid. So you ask him, that fear is not from God. Give me peace in this situation. Let's go ahead and look at the next couple of verses 13 to 16. He spent the night there, and from what he had with him, he selected a gift for his brother Esau. Now listen to this extensive list. This is amazing. Even in our day, you look at how many animals. 200 female goats, 20 male goats, 200 ewes and 20 rams, 30 female camels, and their young, 40 cows, 10 bulls, 20 female donkeys, and 10 male donkeys. Man, that's a lot of animals. He put them in the care of his servants, each herd by itself, and he said to his servants, go ahead of me and keep some space between the herds. Remember before he said, I have a lot of riches. I'm wealthy. Now he's taking that wealth and he's attempting to appease Esau. He's sending this great entourage of animals as a gift. And he's spreading them out. So I see it as a huge amount of animals, but you can see he's spreading them out and it's going to make it look even bigger. This gift is a good example of how we trust in our ability to do things. And again, he's saying, I'm trusting in you, God, but then he's talking to God, and the next thing you know, he takes it back in his own hands. We haven't heard God say any of that yet. In his own wisdom, he's saying, let me try to appease him by giving him stuff. You ever try to appease someone by just giving them stuff? By just taking them a lunch, or your kids, or they'll obey me if I just give them stuff. It's kind of what he's doing. Hopefully, if I can overwhelm him with stuff, maybe that'll help his anger. Let's look at the next couple verses, verse 17 through 21. Listen to the instruction he gives to his servants. He says, he instructed the one in the lead, when my brother Esau meets you and asks, who do you belong to, and where are you going, and who owns all these animals in front of you? Then you are to say, they belong to your servant Jacob. Now he's given specific words. Your servant. He's not above you, he's below you. They are a gift. Now here's the, what do you call it, the icing on the cake. They are a gift sent to you, my Lord. He says, sent to my Lord Esau, and is coming behind us. In other words, I'm your servant, you're my Lord, he's giving these gifts to you, and he's following, you should say, way back in the rear, because that's where he's at. He's way back there. That's probably another reason to spread them out. Give me some time. He says he instructed the second, the third, and all the others who followed. So he spread them out in a bunch of groups. You are to say the same thing. So when Esau went to meet him, and be sure to say, your servant Jacob is coming behind us. For he thought, here's exactly what he's saying. He tells us what he was thinking. I will pacify him with these gifts I am sending ahead. By the time he gets to me, he's going to be just, this is awesome. Later, when I see him, perhaps he will receive me. He's trying to buy him off. Trying to bribe him, basically. So Jacob's gift went on ahead of him, but he himself spent the night in the camp. So Jacob sends the gifts ahead of him, the livestock, ahead of his own arrival. Strategically, again, he spaces them out to, again, I think there's several reasons. To make it look larger. I mean, to me, that's a lot of animals. But imagine if you spread it out. It looks like, man, it's a never-ending gift. But one thing is for sure, he had the messengers repeat the same message over and over. So you know how they tell you, repeat it over and over, and finally it'll get through. Tell him, these gifts are for you from your brother Jacob. These gifts are for you, your servant Jacob. How about this? If Jacob really trusted God, don't you think he would have been at the head of all these animals? He's trusting in what he can do. If God said, go, I'm going to take you there. Trust in me. But he's put this buffer zone. Just in case God doesn't come through. You guys ever do that? Just in case God may not come through, I'm going to stay in the back. So if you really trusted God, he'd be in the front. God says go, you're in the front, you're leading. You're not in the back hoping God's going to protect you. Let's look at the next few verses, verse 22. That night, Jacob got up and took his 2 wives, his 2 female servants, and his 11 sons, and crossed the ford of Jabbok. After he had sent them across the stream, he sent over all his possessions. So Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him till daybreak. When the man saw that he could not overpower him, he touched the socket of Jacob's hip, so that his hip was wrenched as he wrestled with the man. The man said, let me go, for it is daybreak. But Jacob replied, I will not let you go unless you bless me. But Jacob replied, I will not let you go unless you bless me. Then the man asked, what is your name? He says, I'm not going to let you go unless you bless me. And then the guy comes back, the man, he says, what is your name? Jacob, he answered. The man said, your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel, because you have struggled with God and with humans and have overcome. Jacob said, please tell me your name. But he replied, why do you ask my name? Then he blessed him there. So here's what happened. He sends entourage of animals, and then later he sends his family and all his other possessions on the other side of the river. And then that night, that's when the wrestling match ensues. He's there. It says Jacob begins to wrestle with this man. But this all happens on the edge of the promised land. He's almost there. I can't say the name, Jabbok River flows into the Jordan River. So he's almost there. He's like on the outskirts of home. And a man begins to wrestle with Jacob. It begins by saying a man wrestled with Jacob. That's simply what it says. It says they wrestled all night long until the man saw he could not win the match. Now, as we go through this, who's the man? We get some insight as we already read, because he asked him to bless him, right? At the point when he's wrestling with him, it seems to me that Jacob doesn't know who this is. He's wrestling with the man. He doesn't know who he is. Until he says, he can't defeat him, but the man touches his hip. I mean, he's going through this rough, he thinks I got this, man. He's his own physical strength, and the guy simply touches his hip and it's out of socket. Now, I think that's going to make you stop and think, hey, this guy isn't just a man. Who is this? So he touches the hip of his, and the socket comes out of place. What happens? The wrestling match is over, but the fight's not over. After his hip popped out of the socket, Jacob refuses to let go. I mean, this guy's got to be in pain. I don't know about hips. I know my hips hurt sometimes, but imagine popped out of place or whatever. It says wrenched. That's even a worse word. Ripped out of place. He's in a lot of pain, but he won't let go. He says, until you bless me. So that gives you another indication who he is. Bless me. He knew he was defeated, but he desperately wanted a blessing for this one that was greater than him. Let's go and look and see what happens next. We'll know very, very soon. Verse 27. The man asked him, he says, what is your name? I mean, why is he asking, what is your name? Jacob, he answered. Then the man said, your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel, because you have struggled with God and with humans and have overcome. So in the answer, he says, you wrestled with God. He just told you. Which we know is the God-man, Jesus Christ incarnate. And we've seen it in different places in the Old Testament. Again, he's asking what your name is, because you don't know who he is exactly. But he knows he's God. He doesn't have a name for him. So Jesus, basically, I'm going to use Jesus, wrestled all night with Jacob. He saw he couldn't win the match. Is that kind of, what do you mean he saw he couldn't win the match? What he's talking about, that Jacob prevailed in the sense that he endured this struggle until God thoroughly conquered him. Who won in the end? Jesus. He allowed him to struggle. Like he allows us to struggle. Many times we struggle against God, don't we? As he struggled, as he battled with God, we only win by losing. We only win by losing. And by not giving up until you know you have lost. The only way to win, what he's saying is here, is you win by surrendering. When you say surrender, it looks as you're losing. But when it comes to God, when you surrender to him, that's when you really win. You surrender your struggles to him. No longer am I going to fight against you or struggle against you. I'm going to allow you to help me in all my other struggles. Because most of Jacob's life before he came to Laban, he relied on his own wits, his own strength. And you can see his own physical strength before he relied on God. And this was a great example, but all the animals he sent, he was relying on his own wisdom to appease Esau. God never told him to do that. Jesus said to Jacob, let me go, for it is daybreak. But Jacob replied, I will not let you go unless you bless me. Holding on to him, I'm not letting you go. He's already messed up. He's thinking, if this guy touches me again, it's all over. He just take me out. But he says he was determined. And I think that's what God can use. He was determined to hold on till he was blessed by God. And we see here, David Guzik said, God overcame Jacob here. And he says, we know from, if you want to write this down, Hosea chapter 12, verses 3 through 5, tells us that Jacob sought this blessing with weeping. That's what you get when you experience God. You're broken down. You're weeping. To be in His presence, He's weeping. So after this, Jesus asked Jacob, what's your name? Now, I'm just saying, do you think God knew what his name was? Hey, Jacob, what's your name? Oh, it's Jacob. But there's a purpose behind this. Because remember, in the Old Testament, many times their name linked to their nature. Their name wasn't just a name. Like today we pick out names because they're just unique. Well, some of us do. Most of us do, right? Because I like this one. In this culture, it described their nature. It's actually true because sometimes we do it by accident. My brother's middle name is Ray. My grandfather's name is Ray. And I'm like, how in the world did you know he was going to be as obnoxious as my grandfather is? Because my grandfather, he drives down the road and he sees someone and says, hey, something to him like, I don't know if this is true. This could be a lie, but I'm going to tell you anyway. My brother said he said this one time. He said, "Saw a guy. This is going to make my family look really bad. They're all bad anyway." He said, "Are you tired of walking in the rain?" He goes, "Yes." He says, "Maybe you should run a while." That's messed up, huh? And my younger brother had that character, and I'm like, how did you know? I need to keep some of those family traits. I'm not like that all the time. But so we see his character was linked to his name. So we see Jacob, when he asked them, this is an opportunity for Jacob to let it all out and say, this is who I am. This is my character. Up to this point, my name is Jacob, and I fit that title, that character perfectly. Jacob, who are you? That's what he's really saying. Jacob, who are you? I'm Jacob, the hill catcher. I'm the one who trips people up, one who is a conniver, a con man, a scoundrel. That's who I am. I think this is important because Jacob, what do you think his condition is right now? He's humbled. After saying, if you come up and saying, you know what, I know I'm a scoundrel. Kind of like I said, my grandfather, no, he wasn't a scoundrel. He was pretty cool. If you were to come to someone and say, I'm just the worst of worst, and what you're saying is the truth, how humbling is that? This is what he's saying. But he wants him to humble himself before God. God wants him to humble him. And now he's defeated by God. Now God can use him. We come to God and say, I got all this to offer you. God, I can't see why you wouldn't pick me. I think I told you guys a story about a doctor was called to go to Korea. His wife is from Korea. And he says, I'm too busy. Because, doctors are busy. And he says, when he got done, when he retired, he tells God, okay, I'm ready to go. And there was no door that opened for a doctor to go. And they're always looking for a doctor. Well, God is saying, I don't need you. I don't need your skills. I can give you the knowledge, all I wanted. But now he's saying, Jacob is humbled. Now I can use him. And this is when God changes his name to Israel. Israel means governed by God, or God rules. Now, no longer are you going to be governed by yourself, your emotions, your environment. You're going to be governed by God. Let's look at the next few verses, which actually talk about that. 30 to 32 says, So Jacob called the place Peniel, saying, It is because I saw God face to face, and yet my life was spared. The sun rose above him as he passed Peniel, and he was limping because of his hip. Therefore, to this day, this is interesting, to this day the Israelites do not eat the tendon attached to the socket of the hip, because the socket of Jacob's hip was touched near their tendon. And these guys are knocking out all kinds of good food for all kinds of reasons, huh? But you can see why he was. So he named this place, Jacob named this place Peniel, which means face of God. He saw God face to face, which was the only way it was because it was Christ. And he lived. Again, to this day, the Orthodox Jews do not eat the thigh meat of an animal. So in conclusion, what I want to wrap up here is we all have and will continue to have struggles. You have had struggles. You may be in a struggle now, and you will continue to have struggles in this life. But see, there's a way to be victorious through our struggles. And I say through it because that's the way God works. He takes us through the struggles. I'm like, God, just take me out. Let him do it. I'll watch him. You ever think that? I could watch him. I always used to say Pastor Fred, but he's not here today. Maybe Tim. Let Tim go through it. I'll watch Tim. You don't learn. It's like going to VOTEC. You go to you go to school, but you don't really know what you're doing until you actually get that hands-on. So God says, you got to go through it. But through our struggles, we need to humble ourselves and we need to surrender to God. So many times we see God do amazing things, and we're in the next struggle. He's like, I got this, God. Our pride comes up. I've been here before. Just like Jacob, he did all this stuff instead of seeking God in prayer first. How about we seek God in everything? I think that's too small. If we look at the body, there's so many, you know how the DNA, it's amazing. It's like a map. God's invested in the smallest thing. And what I'm saying is, bring anything and everything to Him. I think it'd be a good start, right? Hey, God, what do you think about this? I should have asked Him before I ate that Little Debbie. Should I really eat this thing? Is it going to be? Because He probably said no. It's only when we surrender can He change us from being governed by our emotions, governed by our circumstances, governed by things around us, to being governed by God. The only way that we can be governed by God is we have to surrender. Isn't it the battle that we always face every day? We want to do it our way. And our way is definitely the wrong way. But the thing is, with God, He'll allow us to do that, won't He? Sometimes He's like, God, you just stop me from... It's almost like we want to say, just take my free will away sometimes. Because I make dumb decisions. That's why it's so important to be in the Word. This is God speaking to you. Many people say, how many of you guys like to hear God speak? I'm like, you guys like to hear God speak to you? Yes. Yes. That means you can raise your hand. Yes. So I know it's Wednesday. That's too much to ask. You can by reading this. It's amazing when you read scriptures at times. You can read a scripture over and over, and the time that you're in, He speaks differently, straight to what you need to hear. Because it's a living word. It's not a book. Now, I don't freak out when it gets burned, but I know this is, God speaking through this. But it also means that we need to be spending time with Him. I think the way our society is now, we need to ink God in. Almost for me, it's like I need to put a time in my calendar and say, this is the time I'm going to meet with God. You guys that got good memories, you got it in your head. I can't remember who I am in the next day, but if I have a thing, this is what I'm going to do at 9 o'clock. Or say, maybe I don't sleep into 9. Let's say 7 o'clock. I'm going to get up and pray before you start your day. And as you draw closer to God, you're going to be able to make the decisions, and you're going to be able... It's like you got to surrender to Him. I say every day, but it's almost at every moment, isn't it? Your day can be going good, you surrender to Him, and this issue comes up, and you make the wrong decision. Or you choose the wrong decision. So you got to be just drawing close to Him so that He can change you. And I think I need to be asking all of us is, Lord, just humble me. Keep me humble. Because when I see God do successful things through me, pride seeps in and like, man, I'm pretty good. And He's like, you're an empty vessel that I'm working through. You're like Moses. You can't speak well. I'm doing it all. But don't we all do that, right? We want God to work. Well, let's end there, but we'll continue in Genesis next week. We're ending prayer, and then we'll go into prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank You again for the encouragement. As you, whatever You promised and whatever You say You're going to do, we know without a doubt. As we look back, all the things that You said You've done. Many things You spoken of in the future, then we know they're going to happen. For example, Your Son coming again. The second coming of Jesus, Lord, and we see all the signs that You've told us. I believe His return is soon. Again, the promise of that You will never leave us or forsake us. We need to take hold of that and trust that You're always there with us, no matter if we don't understand or even see it. Give us the ability to have faith and trust in You. And we ask all this in Jesus' name.